Hello and welcome to the Q4 2021 8 Sensus webinar. My name is Kevin McNamara. I'm CEO and founder of 8 Sensus, and I'm happy to host this session. Today we will discuss 8 Sensus Eve, hear from two guest speakers, roll through a demonstration, and close out the session with use cases. Dave Armstrong, CIO of Judge Group, and Dan Griffith, Senior Leader at Arrow Distributors. Dave and Dan, would you be good enough to just say hello to the audience? Thanks so much.
Hi, my name is David Armstrong. I'm currently the CIO of the Judge Group, which is a technical staffing and medical staffing, a contract consulting company, and a learning company based in Philadelphia, PA. I was formerly the CISO for the past 4 years and recently took on the role of CIO. Pleased to meet everybody.
Pleasure, Dave. Thank you.
Excellent. My name's Dan Griffith. So I am a director of Modern Data Center within Arrow. Now, Arrow are a distributor and a close partner of 8 Sensus. So pleased to be on the call and to remotely meet you all.
So first of all, 8 Sensus is an identity access management ecosystem. We differ from the rest of the pack because we focus on behaviors and we focus on making those behaviors your identity. Traditional models look at password, PIN, multi-factor, dongles, etc., and then they basically protect just the login. Is we ensure that as you approach your machine, your desktop, your VDI, whatever it happens to be, and you start typing and you have mouse movements and you have micro gestures on your face, that becomes your identity. That's the first thing that's really important. So it's a seamless, transparent, and an inviting experience. The second thing that we do is we do this for the entirety of the transaction. We don't just stop at the login. We ensure that as you're using every application, as you're using every facet of the experience, that this becomes a completely secure experience. And then we do this with machine learning at the endpoint. We do this to privacy so that you don't have any data that ever leaks the environment. For instance, you couldn't just put a piece of paper with a photo in front of the screen to overcome the security. The second thing is I could give you the same password that I use on my keyboard. You could type it and you couldn't access the machine because it's all about how you micro gesture. It's about how you use the keyboard. It's all about how you use the mouse and how you inflect your voice. And that's what's really important about the solution. So based on this, we built our solution around our product stack that we call Eve. So Eve does three things really importantly. So the first thing we do is identity. Identity is based on multi-factor behavior experience. We use LiDAR capture. It's really critical that our audience understands the difference between a camera capture and LiDAR. So LiDAR means that we look at the mathematics of your micro gestures. We don't look at the pictures. We don't take any pictures. We don't dump them on the local machine. Now, the second component of what we do is we make sure that you're private regardless of where you are. So during COVID and post-COVID, it's really important to understand that as you use your laptop or your VDI, it could be in a coffee shop, you could be at home, and really at all points, you should be confident that you're working privately. If somebody's looking over your shoulder, Eve is happy to let you know and shut down the machine or shut down the screen. If you're in a very busy room, Eve will help you to understand where a good place is to use your data and where it's not. And we do this, of course, continuously. So again, it's identity, it's privacy, and it's continuous. So based on the Eve solution, beyond the three tenets that I just went over, we work anywhere, anytime, on any device. Again, the whole geo presence, the whole public office is a very real thing, and something I think Dave will be happy to talk to, and even Dan. And it's something that will be a part of us post-COVID. I think COVID has proven over and over that the world is really the office. We work inside and outside of any enterprise. So because Eve is built to be ubiquitous, we work on corporate enterprise laptops. We work on private laptops. We work on every type of device inside and outside. So the experience is something that is transparent and seamless. The product itself can be delivered as a Windows OS install as well as an OS X. We typically service remote access, enterprise laptops, and virtual machines. In addition to that, we also have a browser plugin that allows you to SaaS-delivered applications for mobile users that service the healthcare, legal, customer service, and online students and enterprises. In addition to that, we also have a productivity tool. We're very excited to mention the fact that we are quite different from anybody else in the industry. So, as a for instance, we typically see identity access management that is very much about the login and just protects the machine. What we do is we ensure that as you're using your applications, as you're using the Chrome browser, it's just you that's using those applications. And with enterprise plugins, we can report timesheets and usages based on productivity, and something that I think has been very successfully judged. And this really allows you to be confident that if you have contingent workforces, if you have remote workers that you want to ensure are using the correct applications and providing that real-time office experience, you can do that. The installation from start to finish, from the time you push via GPO, via SCCM or a script, and then you train to 1 in 5 million resolution continuously, is a 5-minute process. We service the financial, the healthcare, and educational, as well as local government and military channels. So we have customers in every one of these channels. We're a global company, and we have partnerships with Arrow. We're very excited to have Dan talk about this at some point, and we hope that this rings well with everyone. So I ran through a whole ton in just a couple of minutes, and I want to hand off to our friend Dave Armstrong from Judge, who would like to just chat a little bit about the experience at Judge. Dave?
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate the intro. And everyone, I apologize for the urgent nature here, but I had something crowbarred onto my schedule at the last minute. And unfortunately, I'm not able to push it off. So with that, I'll open up by saying that we've been an 8 Sensus customer for 18 months now. Kevin and I know each other previously. And when I found out that Kevin was involved in 8 Sensus, it resonated with me. And here's why it resonated with me. We have a scattered workforce. We have a hybrid workforce. We have people who are in offices, people who are working from homes, people who are younger, millennials, who share apartments with people. And these people need to connect to the network. On the back end, we have VMware. And I'm sure Kevin will touch on that because this does plug into VMware. And we had no way of really, truly, beyond just using Duo as a multi-factor, of knowing who was actively connecting to our network. And that was a big, big problem for us. So as a technical company, which is what Judge is, we wanted to do something with Kevin and his team that really, really spoke to developing technology, getting into AI, getting into ML. And this is where 8 Sensus really fit the bill for us. So one of our tenets here is we have a zero trust security model. And Kevin's product and the 8 Sensus product, Eve, dovetails right into that zero trust model for us. We make sure that we absolutely validate identity, privacy, and productivity. And those are the 3 tenets. So at the very start of this 18 months ago, it all started to just come together for us. We've worked closely with Kevin and his team. And I will say that the level of service that we've gotten over the past 18 months has been exemplary. There's been some development that we've done with the product that's particular to Judge. That development was taken on by Keith Hinkle, and who's worked closely with our engineering team here to deliver a product that actually fits Judge and fits what we do. So I want to talk a little bit about what we do and how we do it. We have a medical division, so that checks one of the verticals that's Kevin's in right there, and also we're a technical staffing company. And when it comes to technical staffing, we're putting people to work, and we have to manage their identity because even though they're working for somebody else, they're still our W-2 employee. So we have to safeguard their identity. And the issue we had was had more and more people who were in positions at Judge who had access to sensitive information, people's driver's license, people's social security numbers. And how do we manage all that by somebody now who says, hey, I need a hybrid workforce model, or I'm going to go to a competitor, or somebody else is offering me the ability to work from home 2-3 days a week. You need to match that. So while we're dealing with churn, while we're dealing with COVID, while we're dealing with an actual explosion in our workforce here with the number of people we were putting to work, we needed a way to reliably say, hey, this person sitting in front of this screen accessing sensitive data really is this person, and we can trust that it's this person. And that was the original concept we came to Kevin with. And here's our struggle. They were able to meet that. When we put that in place and we were successful at it, we started having people come to us now saying, "Hey, I heard you did this for the medical team, and I heard you this for the technical staffing team. Well, I now have to offer non-exempt employees a hybrid work model, which was unheard of before. So how do we track their activity? How do we track what they do? How do we make sure that they're being productive? Well, there's an enterprise data portal now that Kevin's team has developed, and we can go in and just pull reports. We actually know who's sitting in front of the monitor and who's not just logged on, wiggles the mouse every hour, and then leaves and goes and watch Netflix. So this was a game changer for us, and it ensured productivity. And we've been able to, I don't want to be too too cruel here, but we've been able to weed out non-productive workers versus productive workers using the reporting function inside the 8 Sensus data lake. So we start looking at how the relationship has developed over time. We're going to keep developing this relationship because it's essential to what we do when we're providing this hybrid workforce. We've added an extra 400 employees over the past year. Our profitability is up 20%, and we don't see any end to that growing. And having tools like Eve in the background, ensuring that your workforce can reliably access systems, we can absolutely identify who's sitting in front of the screen, and we can absolutely identify the number of hours that they're working. Like I said, it was a game changer for us. Some of the struggles that we've had are with people who thought that Eve was taking pictures of their home. Eve was recapturing what was going on in their house. And we were able to get around that by explaining how LiDAR worked. We had Kevin and his team come in, they spoke. And after that calmed down, then there were really no more barriers to entry. The last thing we did was we set up an enrollment station here. So you come in when you start working, as you're going through training, you come up, you enroll in Eve. By the time you get back to your home, your new equipment has arrived, you're already enrolled, and you're up and running. So I don't want to take all the time, but that's kind of the use case that we have for Eve. It dovetails with our zero trust security model. It does the identity, privacy, and productivity that we need it to do. And now we're looking at furthering the relationship with 8 Sensus as we move along. And I'll hand it back to you, Kevin.
Hey, thanks so much for the kind words. So I have just one following question. I know that initially, Judge, at the beginning of COVID, were dealing with just the general motivation of people to work remotely. Do you find that post-COVID that's changed significantly, or what does your model look like compared to pre-COVID?
Well, pre-COVID, we were, you had to be on-prem. And that was now, Kevin, we're offering the 3-2 model. That's what we're rolling out across. And as we roll out the 3-2 model, Eve, it makes sure that we can maintain that model and that we can scale that model as we move along. So post-COVID to us looks exactly like COVID. There's no real change in the workforce demands and the expectations. And especially with the gig workforce and the millennial workforce, we're having to adjust what we do and how we actually even provide and provision equipment and what equipment we provision and how it's provisioned. So we're constantly evolving how we manage our workforce.
Yeah, I tell you, Dave, I've heard from multiple customers that that has really become such a big deal. So pre-COVID, I know that there was a ton of debate about whether or not folks could work remotely and confidently. And really the issue was just that many CISOs and many CEOs were worried about the quality of workmanship as well as whether or not the data was safe. And that's just something that we focus on. So that
Yeah, but one of the biggest game changers for us was we had a corporate policy that you're a non-exempt employee. You had no expectation of working from home, right? Now with the reporting and tracking that's in place, we've kind of broken down that barrier a bit. So we lost some non-exempt employees who were valuable employees, but they didn't have the job description of the role. That means we could transfer them to an exempt position. Now we're able to offer the non-exempt employee and track their productivity through Eve. And that's been a real game changer for us.
it's just one final question, Dave. Do you think that the C-level executives at Judge have changed their mind about extending the workforce? Say, for instance, in areas of the world that you wouldn't have thought of before, using Eve and and the productivity associated to it.
Well, I don't want to say too much on that, Kevin, because I haven't been okay to release it. But our India operation will be coming on board at some time.
Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate bits of information. I think they'll be completely invaluable for us and for the audience. And so, really great case study, and so appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. And again, I apologize for like having to leave at 9:30. But if you want to put my contact information out there, Kevin, if anybody wants to reach out to me afterwards, I'll be happy to entertain that conversation.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Got it, Kevin.
All right, cheers. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll come back to the very next bit, which is to walk through some words from our Chief Operating Officer and CISO, as well as our lead data scientist, and we'll do a very quick demonstration.
Hello, my name is Jamie De La Fuente, and I am the COO and CISO of Sensus. I see Sensus and our flagship identity engine, Eve, as the next generation solution in identity management and workspace security. With Eve, we are changing how you look at security. Instead of thinking of a user ID and a password as a cornerstone of your credentials, we are focusing first on a zero trust concept where access is based on not what you remember, but rather on you, your behaviors, your environment, in a continuous multi-factored approach, keeping your identity and data always secure. As CISO, I can quickly realize the benefits Eve presents in the security needs of every organization and having a system that can uniquely, securely, and continuously maintain the absolute protection of your identity and workspace, while online, offline, anywhere, anytime, and on any device. To provide a detailed explanation of how Eve works, I would like to present Keith Hinkle, our lead data scientist, to explain further. Keith?
Thank you, Jamie. Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Hinkle, and I am the lead data scientist for Sensus. It is my pleasure to lead a team of very talented engineers on Eve, our flagship product. The reason we developed Eve was to provide a solution to secure the user's data while being transparent, seamless, and convenient. There are three key functionalities that Eve performs, and performs them quite well if I do say myself. They are to ensure and certify your identity, to also ensure and certify that regardless of where you are working privately and securely. And most importantly, Eve does all of this continuously, working for you. What makes Eve different from other security solutions is that we do not use today's standards of entry into your device by using passwords, PINs, or dongles. Instead, Eve uses you. Your identity is certified by Eve using the camera, keyboard, mouse, and voice from your device. Our AI and machine learning uses all of these individual components to build a mathematical algorithm profile of you. Eve uses that profile to create a bond between you and your device. No two profiles are the same, and profiles cannot be moved from device to device. All data used by Eve is encrypted and never leaves the local device. One of the most unique attributes of Eve is how it certifies that regardless of where you are working privately. This is accomplished by Eve's continuous monitoring, thus ensuring that no one is spying on your data over your shoulder, and you are the only one using your device. If Eve detects another person who you have not yet authorized to looking over your shoulder, Eve will lock down your screen and protect your data. As I stated before, Eve is continuously monitoring and evaluating the user's identity and the privacy of that user's environment. Unlike other security solutions that only block an unwanted user from accessing the device, Eve secures your workspace on multiple levels.
hopefully everybody was able to see the actual interplay there. So I just want to come back to the fact that Eve do the training. You can do the training in less than 5 minutes. You get 1 in 5 million resolution after the training. And by the way, you don't just get 1 in 5 million resolution for the login, you get it for the entire experience. The second part that I think is quite important to mention is that we have a complete ecosystem for the enterprises that allow you to get the complete enterprise experience. So as a, for instance, with our portal, which you can deploy on any Docker, Kubernetes, or microservice, or even full server install, you have the ability to store all of the forensics that you have, including application usage, identity access usage, and tie them together to create a complete profiled experience, or for lack of better terms, productivity experience, so that you can produce timesheets. So as a, for instance, where this becomes really transformational is if you have offshore teams. So Dan, I'm going to just hand this off to you. Maybe you can speak a bit about Arrow and how we partner together, and I would say talk about the channels, that type of thing.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So you can see a few of the names on the call, and I know that you're familiar with Arrow, so I won't go into it in too much detail, but ultimately we are a distributor, very, very large worldwide. We're around about $28 billion worldwide, and I work in the UK, so we're about £1 billion in the UK. Now, we work with a lot of different vendors out there, and what we pride ourselves on is really being different to a lot of disties out there. We want to make sure that we're believing in the benefits of technology and reaching as many people with those technologies. We've got lots of vendors we work with, but what we're trying to do is very much take something different to market, something that's really going to differentiate ourselves and something that we can get excited about. And that's one of the reasons we decided to work closely with Sensus. We've got the technologies, we're familiar with identity access management, but the way that Sensus do it is just so different. It's so exciting, tying in with a lot of the things we're seeing out there in the marketplace at the minute, the machine learning, the AI, the zero trust, all of those kind of messaging that's coming out. It's got a really, really good play with those. We also mentioned it earlier in terms of VMware. The partnership that's there is really, really key to us as well. And so many of the things we've mentioned around the sort of continuous monitoring, not just at the entry point and the productivity side, we just found it really, really exciting. So we decided to sign an exclusive agreement with Sensus and have really been taking it out to market with a lot of our partners. So we're pushing it out into the reseller community, all different levels really, the SMB, mid-market, into the enterprise as well. So really it's a very, very exciting proposition at the minute, and we're looking forward to building that business together.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Dan. So I'm going to just pop some use cases up that we have seen to be, we're very successful. And I'm hoping, Dan, if you could just help me to sort of talk and discuss through these use cases and the value to the channel. The first go-to use case that we're always very successful at is remote worker and student, right? So every enterprise in the world before COVID had a 20% remote worker workforce and an 80% in the office. Post-COVID, we're seeing, if you just think back to Dave's conversation, they're doing a 3-2 model specifically for judge, meaning that 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. And we're actually finding that many organizations are actually doing the opposite, which is a 2-3, right? So 2 in the office, 3 at home. So the model has flipped around on its side. And we're seeing that there's a huge request for remote worker solutions. And where we fit very nicely is the fact that we can address things like, for instance, data privacy and geolocation, where it's really important to understand where it's a good idea to have, for instance, an HR document open. And it's also a good idea to understand where it's okay to just simply peruse, that type of thing. Dan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're seeing lots of different variants really in terms of what the remote working strategy is. We're finding that in sort of some of the larger populated areas, for instance, in London, we're seeing that a lot of people, due to the cost of property and also the risk of people traveling in busy environments, we're seeing that that's happening a lot less. People are still remote working and not really traveling into the city as much. If you use Arrow as an example, our head office in Harrogate, a lot of people returning back to work in that environment, but on more of a 3-2 kind of basis. So yeah, as we look across all of our different partners and what we're seeing in the market, lots of different variants, but definitely everyone has changed their view in terms of, having a lot more flexibility in terms of how people can work.
So I would say that for us, what we found specifically in the European UK markets is that GDPR is a really critical factor. So the way we answer GDPR is really quite simple. So as I mentioned before, the Eve engine uses mathematical based algorithms to identify you, your behaviors, quantify them, learn them, and all of that, say, forensics is basically only useful on that end machine. So as for instance, if you were to take the mathematics and try to push that to a different machine, it would be absolutely useless because it's bonded to that machine. And that's really critical. We never push any type of PII over the wire. So as for instance, we would never take a person's biometrics because we don't use biometrics. We would never take a person's personal information because that's not what the engine looks at for your identity. And so that's why we've been very successful in GDPR focused markets. And as for instance, for hospital networks, et cetera, HIPAA is a really big deal. And because we avoid all of those areas where we typically have seen resistance for other vendors, we've been very successful. And just as a point, before we close out this use case, remote worker includes, hey, I'm a staff member working wherever. Maybe I'm a sales person. Maybe I'm a person that happens to be home for the day and I'm working at home or in a coffee shop or at a friend's home. That's what we mean by a remote work. And this is really valuable because this means that your office is wherever you go. And so we're also going to have another webinar, by the way, Dan, that talks a bit more about what we're doing with audio, where we can ensure not just the fact that we can look for privacy, but we also can then look to turn off the audio in the background and to mute people from being able to hear what you're talking about. So we're changing even that dimension of remote worker. So this leads to the very next, which is the shared workstation, typically indicative of hotel, cubicles in enterprises, maybe shared public workstations in healthcare, and then also hotspots for call centers. What really is differential from this and the remote worker is the remote worker typically has one machine to one person. In the shared workstation, you can have a single machine that's shared by N people. That typically would be difficult. What Eve do is Eve takes the user's Active Directory credential and pairs it to the behavior. So as for instance, Eve forces an individual to use only that individual's ecosystem. So I'll give you an example. You can have a workstation in a hospital framework that is in the open where it's shared by multiple doctors. So let's say Dr. A goes up to the workstation and puts in their login, and then he picks it up and authenticates for the entire session. And an emergency ensues and the doctor walks away. And another doctor pops in, and it just happens to be within that 3-second period that he would lock the workstation down. You would immediately see that the wrong person's in front of the screen. Also, if they start typing, we would notice that the wrong person's in front of the screen. So it would then force that person to log in with their correct credential and then bond it directly to that user. So it's a seamless experience. It allows you to containerize data, and really, really critical. And we have seen, and we have a massive installs that are currently in user acceptance with very, very large hospital networks, and that's a really critical fact. The other portion of this that I think is really important is that Eve works with tap and go ecosystems, which typically in Pravada, Duo, SailPoint, all of these vendors typically have this. We don't get in the way. We still allow for that. We work with VDI and hard workstations, such that Dave had mentioned before. We allow for authentication within 7 to 15 seconds. Really critical. If you're a doctor in a hospital and you're trying to help a patient, you don't want to have to wait for a couple of minutes to get in, right? It's really critical that we do things in seconds, right? And then if you happen to walk away for the second and you want to come back in, it's typically a 2 to 4 second reconnect. Really critical, again, that in a hospital framework, you containerize patient data, you containerize a doctor's workstation, and you do this very, very quickly. And then in addition to that, that it's GDPR and HIPAA compliant. So Dan, this is something that's, I know we have had partnership discussions in the past. I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that, but that's typically the way that shared workstations work.
Yeah, so again, it's something we're familiar with from a consumer side of things, using our wallet, our cards on our phone, and we don't really think about it. We're quite familiar. So bringing that into the enterprise and being able to utilize it in the same way is absolutely critical. And again, one of the reasons we're so excited to be working closely with you. I think the tie-in, we're talking a lot in the marketplace around Kubernetes and sort of the time of containerization. So it's just a great story. And I think the more that we can drive this out into the reseller community, we're going to get more and more stories of success and fantastic case studies to be built out on.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So the very next use case is the ATM. And this is something that we have been working on with financial entities. And really what we want to do is change yesterday's notion of a PIN and a card experience. So for instance, if you want to go to an ATM, what you can do is you can take your ATM card, walk up to an ATM or a hole in the wall, as in the UK, the reference would be, and you would pop the card into the slot and push your PIN in and then go through a whole sort of transaction. What you can do with Eve is you can pre-authenticate against the financial framework. And then when you walk up to an ATM, you can transform that into a completely different experience. So for instance, you could pop up, then the camera picks up and you put in a PIN if you want a second level of authentication. And then whilst you're actually transacting the entire time, Eve will ensure that it's only you and that there's nobody looking over your shoulder, all of the basic things that Eve do, and then you can walk away. So this removes the sort of hard currency need of a card, right? So many banks spend a ton of money managing cards to people, managing when they're lost, managing when they're stolen, all of that, right? That goes away and it just becomes a very clean and simple transaction, and something we're very excited about because we're working through that right now with some large financial entities. And then the last one to mention, and I actually missed one. Now I'll come back to that in a minute. The last use case to mention is the black site community. So for instance, these are communities in defense, both in the UK as well as in the Americas, where everything is cordoned off from the internet. So for instance, you walk onto one of the campuses and there is no internet, there's no Wi-Fi. And the reason why this is critical is because you're protecting government data as well as you're protecting good people around the globe who are doing work to protect all of us. So for instance, we have some customers that use Eve. And by the way, Eve works with and without internet. So we work on and offline, really critical. So once Eve is bonded to an individual, that individual can work on and offline with no issues whatsoever. And what that means is you can take a laptop, and once you've bonded to it, turn off the internet and you can use the laptop with full confidence that authentication is in flight. So that's a really big deal. And so many of the defense use cases would include, things like deployments on demand. And then once the deployment is finished, then the systems get wiped. Really, really critical, and something that we answer to that no other can answer to at this point without a ton of overhead. So in addition to that, there's one that I did not mention, which is really quite critical, and that's the call centers. So call centers are akin to, so for instance, the shared workstation, I sort of did mention a little bit. Call centers are really interesting because you typically have turnovers. They happen 24 hours a day. People pop in, and they work as a secondary entity to banks, to social media, etc. And they manage personal data all the time. They manage employees and experiences. And the critical part about this is that it's very weird for me. Call centers are typically people who are not vetted like financial entities, who do on-demand work. And there have been many use cases where call center individuals have stolen data, etc. Right? So something that Eve can do, we can ensure that that individual is actually working on what they're supposed to. We can ensure that they're following the rules. We can ensure that, in fact, that person is on call from 1 hour to the other. So really critical that we mention that. So overall, this is Eve, and these are the verticals where we're so happy that Dave and Dan have joined us today. So Dan, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend. It's been too long, and thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks so much.
Take care all.
Bye now.